Welcome into TNT at Twincast. We appreciate you guys checking out one of our videos. Do us a solid, like, subscribe, and hit us with a comment down below. It's the best way for us to grow our channel. We appreciate you guys so much, and go Noles. Welcome to TNT Twincast. This is the Garnet and Goal Line podcast. The gang is all here. We got Aaron, Thomas, and I'm Tori. We're going to talk some Florida State. Wanted to start off by congratulating the women's soccer team on their national title win against the Stanford Cardinal 5-1. This fan base really needed a
Dominant.
win. Dominant. This fan base really needed a win. And the ladies brought it home. So congrats to them. That is a program that continues to climb, continues to get better, and we are very, very proud of them as a fan base. So we're going to start this off with some ACC title talk. Florida State wins the ACC title 16-6 against Louisville on Saturday. What a crazy game to watch. You had a true freshman quarterback in Brock Glenn get the start. His stat line wasn't great, but I think one of the things that he did really, really well, and I can't wait to get y'all's take on this game, he protected the ball. And I felt at any point in time it could have been a really bad scenario. You could tell Louisville was kind of headhunting for him a little bit. Whenever they got the chance, they really, really hit him hard. So congrats to Mike Norvell and the team. ACC title was a huge goal for the year, and this team goes out and gets the job done against a really, really good Louisville team. I think that the story of this game was the defense for sure. That unit, I'm not sure I've seen a Florida State defensive unit show up like that in a really, really, really long time. And I can't wait to get y'all's take. Thomas, I'm going to start with you. Florida State, they are ACC champs. What are your thoughts on them winning the title and how that game played out?
For me, it was big. It was huge. I was actually probably the most nervous about this game. I had been all year. Of course, you want to beat your rivals. You beat Clemson in Death Valley. All that stuff is great, but like this was really where we could this team could cement their legacy, and even though we'll get into the stuff after the ACC championship, you had a bunch of these players, all decide to come back, and it's because they came back because they wanted to do something special, and so winning that ACC championship, beating both of your rivals, being undefeated, I felt like up until, obviously, again, we'll talk about after the ACC championship, but up until that, or yeah, we'll talk about what happened after that. But up until the point of with them winning the ACC, they had accomplished every single one of their goals. So for me, it was all worth it. Um, and those kids deserved to win that conference championship. To see them with their hats on and with their big, conference championship shirts on and all that stuff, they deserved that. Got to give a lot of credit to Louisville. They had a fantastic year. Um, they're going to keep getting better. Baum's a hell of a coach, so um, he's going to be good for the ACC. But talking about the game as a whole, I felt like you saw a couple things that really you got to really like. One of them is not really Brock Glenn, honestly. His stat line was bad. And you're right. For the most part, he protected the ball, but he also had a little bit of luck. They had some crazy drops. I guess that's why they're playing defense. Just kidding. Uh, but they drop those passes and it turns into a pass breakup. So they don't catch those ints, and we continue to keep the ball, and then he's mostly mistake free or turnover free. Outside of that, there were times throughout this year where you kind of felt that, you know, where the play calling was going and where, how we might struggle moving the ball, that, Mike was kind of leaving his quarterback on an island to just kind of figure it out. And there were moments in the beginning of this game where you kind of felt the same thing, um, with Brock Glenn, where it was like, hey, we're gonna throw a couple pass plays your way, and he was just not seeing the field at all. Like I was seeing some of the open guys and the checkdowns that he could have gone to. So that got me a little bit worried. So you were kind of wondering throughout the first quarter, like, hey, is this going to be like a 6-0 kind of game? Like something's going to have to give somewhere. Like, where's the wrinkle? Like it wasn't just like a regular, and then all of a sudden they bust out the Wildcat, and
Mm.
Louisville has no idea how to defend it. And I thought that right there was a credit to Mike Norvell and the coaching staff that they were able to like draw something up that really worked. And of course, down the road, Toafili ends up turning it into probably one of the biggest plays of the night. Um, so you get the Wildcat. That's like the coaching wrinkle. And then as the game gets a little further into the second quarter, we've seen the Wildcat. We've driven down the field. We've shown that we were able to make a couple plays. All of a sudden, we start noticing this just freak show performance by the defense, where we're like, "Holy crap, this is unbelievable!" Like one of the first plays, Braden Fisk just makes a move, right to the center, or maybe it was one of the guards. Just all of a sudden, he gets a tackle for loss. What we didn't know was that was just going to keep happening. Um, and this defense was just going to have what I consider to be an all-time great performance by a Florida State defense. It wasn't like they didn't have their starting quarterback or any. They were fresh. They were ready to go. I'm sure they were a little frazzled from their Kentucky game, but like for the most part, they were injury free, I felt. So just an absolute masterclass in defense. I felt like for the most part, Mike Norvell and definitely Adam Fuller had outcoached Brom, and their defensive coordinator. So I thought it was a really good night for the coaching staff, for the players, and of course you want to see Brock Glenn complete a pass, right? He didn't get a lot of help from the receivers, which is unfortunate. It sucks that that's kind of the night. Of course, we're going to get the Georgia game, but it won't be the same team, right? Of course, that was the last game that you'd see the two receivers, two NFL guys, on either end of your offense. And unfortunately, I think Johnny had a pretty good night, but I feel like Keon had some critical drops. Of course, they were most likely not great throws. He had to come back to a couple. So, he's got to catch that pass. He's your NFL guy, right? Well, they're both your NFL guys, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Um, but anyway, great defensive performance. Um, Mike Norvell was able to draw up just enough for us to win. The defense was inspiring. Again, we'll get into the playoff talk later, but I felt like this defensive performance, I felt, you know, put me in a position to where I felt like we could compete with anybody in college football. We get them in these short scoring, tight affairs where neither defense is really giving up, and who knows what'll happen. But that was kind of what pivoted for me, where I was like, okay, I think we really can make some noise in the college football playoff. But again, back to the ACC championship, I thought it was great. When it hit zero and we won, I was so happy. Um, Crazy pivot, right? Um, Almost traumatic, one would say. But uh, but yeah, super proud of the team. Um, if anything, we can be happy with the fact that we are ACC champions. Um, and yeah, that's kind of my take.
Yeah, I remember when the game first started and we didn't really look like we could really do much. And I remember just thinking like, okay, this is Mike, so I feel like he's setting stuff up, and I do feel like the first few drives kind of showed them that maybe like a slow developing running play would really be a really huge key here, and that's when you started seeing that kind of slow quarterback power out of the Wildcat that Louisville just didn't have any response for. So credit Mike, his ability to really draw things up, continues to be a strength for him as a coach, and I really think that's only going to get better. But Aaron, Florida State ACC champs, thoughts on the game last night?
As I looked at watching that game, obviously it was a nervous wreck because you're assuming that there's a lot of stuff on the line for it. And you also know that, there's a chance that, this could be the team kind of maximizing their potential, even if they made the playoff, which you thought they would. You're thinking, this may be the last win they get on the season or have a shot at potentially, just depending on how matchups go and everything. And so um, there's a lot riding on it. And obviously, when Brock Glenn came out and you kind of watch the first couple of drives, it's not inspiring from that perspective because as much as we respect our defense, I think, and realize that our defense was capable of playing very well, you also recognize that Jeff Brom is a fantastic coach, and if you can't put up points, all it's going to take is a couple of drives that something happens, a play busts open, or Brom pulls together a string of plays, and then you're losing a game because you just can't do anything from the offensive side. But when I did notice this at the beginning, at the end of the first quarter, um, it's 0-0, and I'm like, okay, that was one of the keys to the game that we looked at. It said Louisville starts games fast.
Mhm.
They've outscored their opponents by a lot of points in the first quarter throughout the year, and we needed to avoid giving Louisville a fast start, and we did, right? Obviously, we didn't start fast in terms of scoring, but you kept it 0-0, and so that was a good start. Then as the game goes along, it felt like there was things that started to develop. We kicked a field goal, especially the end of the second quarter. Like you had a chance to finish a drive, and then we have two pass plays that are, sack, and then what was almost a sack, and then potentially, was close to being a penalty as well. And so you're like, you had a couple possessions there where it seemed like you could have got another field. Well, so we missed a field goal, I think, which was in the second quarter, and then after that, which was set up. If it was a few yards shorter from not taking a sack the previous play or a penalty or whatever it was, maybe that goes in, and so it's 6-0. You're like, all right, well, at least we're like field goal proof. But you miss that, and then you almost have a shot at getting the ball back on that fumble. And so there's just a couple of different things that you thought, man, we're like really close to being up multiple possessions, and you're thinking, if we get up by a couple scores, like we're probably going to win the game the way it's going at that point. And you just couldn't quite do it. So then we get into the third quarter, and that Louisville did what I was worried was about to happen because I figured we've come out and we make our adjustments at halftime. We're kind of responding to the offense, and we have an opportunity to get ahead and do better, and bring out some stuff that they aren't ready for. And this side, it felt like we brought everything out at the front to because we needed to, and I was thinking, well, now Brahm's going to have the chance to respond to what we're doing, and then our defense is not going to play as well in the second half as they did in the first half. Well, I mean, they gave up points as opposed to not giving up points. So from that perspective, you could say maybe that was the case. And early on in the third quarter, it seemed that way because Brahm started drawing up a series of plays on a drive that was like, yep, here it comes.
Yep.
He's in his bag. We're blitzing into stuff, and he's calling plays the opposite way. And you're thinking, yep, we might be in trouble. And I was feeling like we are going to need to put up 17 to 20 points to probably win the game at the way it was going. I thought the offense teams would get desperate. They'd start busting out everything they had, and the scores would start piling up just a little bit. That didn't happen because the defense just played out of their minds for the entire game and made an experienced veteran quarterback who's not the greatest quarterback in the world, but he knows what he's doing, and Brom calls a good game for him. And you made him look like all the backups that we've been playing throughout the season who looked like they had no idea what they were doing. And you did that to an experienced offensive coordinator with an experienced quarterback and a competent cast of players on offense, and put together one of the greatest defensive performances that I can remember as a fan, given the context at the very least of it's a quality team or quality offense, and you're in a big game, and it's in the modern era where defense is basically crippled with the rules and the way the game is played. Toa Philly um, got to be the MVP, and obviously from an offensive perspective, he gets the only touchdown in the game, so that stands out in a setting in a modern football world where offense, gets the favors and a lot of things. But the defense won you the game ultimately. And Braden Fisk absolutely has a an argument to be the player of the game and to be the MVP of that. I mean, he basically bookended it. The first,
Yep.
his second down on the opening drive, he makes a monster play. He gets the fourth down sack to end the game for Louisville. Like he bookends that
Twice.
with plays.
Twice.
Yeah. So he makes a massive play to begin, makes a massive play to end, and all in between, he's wrecking their offensive line along with the other guys. If you wanted to make more of like a short-term MVP of someone who had a pivotal moment probably won you the game, it'd be Tatum Bethune. That
Oh,
when they
That's a good pick.
sacked the punter, that was the moment when I'm like, there it is. You needed to avoid a big mistake, and you just had it, and you gave them the ball at like the 10-yard line. And I was like, that's it. That's gonna break it.
Yeah.
They're gonna score a touchdown, take the lead, and we're done. And Tatum Bethune had what like a well for one, he literally saved a touchdown on the first play by ripping the ball out of the guy's arms as he was falling to the ground. Then he makes a tackle on the next play on the running back to stop him short along with Thomas. And then he gets the interception, and you're like, at that point, you're like, no, Louisville's done. Like, if you couldn't punch it in there, that's a backbreaker. That you realize
Mm.
that was your chance to score. You couldn't do it. And now the defense is reinvigorated and they close that game out just like they did Florida. So incredibly proud of the team. It was, I know all the people who are not FSU fans who are like, oh, that was an ugly game to watch. If you appreciate football and you appreciate good defense, that was very fun to watch from the defensive side of things. Infinitely frustrating from an offensive perspective, but that shouldn't detract from the fact that the defense actually it elevates how great the defense played, that your offense was not flipping the field like the entire game. They flipped the field maybe once or twice. And other than that, they did nothing on that front, and the defense just kept bowing up. And just incredibly proud of them. They deserve all the respect in the world. And Fuller had a fantastic game plan, and they executed it. So definitely proud of the team for finding a way to get that win and to win it the way they did.
yeah. Jack Plummer's stat line finished up at 14 for 36, 111 yards, 0 scores, and 1 pick. Um,
Wow.
Florida State, Louisville went 3 of 18 on third, 0 of 3 on fourth, and had
0
two
of 3. Wow.
and had 2.7 yards per play on 70 plays.
Wow.
That's like unbelievable, man. Like,
Against an offense that averaged 30, over 30 points a game. So it's not like we're talking about Iowa's offense with their backup QB or something. Like you're talking about an offense that actually is competent.
yeah, and a coach that knows how to scheme things up. I mean,
Mm.
I watched a ton of reviews for this game, and the whole time it was Norvell versus Brom. How many points are we going to see? And that did not turn out to be the case at all. So it's a huge credit to the defensive staff, Coach Fuller. I would say his best game as a Florida State coach ever when you
Yeah,
take into
absolutely.
consideration.
It won you the ACC title.
Yeah, right. When you take into consideration what this game could mean, when you take into consideration the fact that because of what you had going on the other side of the ball, you had to have this, um, and you got it. And not one point that I want to make, and we talked a lot about along the D line and how well that unit played. I want to talk about Renardo Green, Azarie Thomas, and Akeem Dent. Those guys showed up and played.
Mhm.
And again, credit to them, the entire unit, just an incredible game for them, incredible win for Mike and his staff. Um, very excited for the team. I felt that the ACC title was like the highest that this team could go, and they ended up getting it done. And kudos to them. Just very excited. This team deserved to have something in writing, and they got that with an ACC title. Um, so after that game, I ended up getting to bed around 1 o'clock. I got up, felt great, sitting on my bed, hanging out with my boy, and I saw something on Facebook about the playoff selection show, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that was today." What time is it? Oh, it's at noon. Oh, cool. I don't go into work until 2. That means I get to watch the playoff selection show. So excited. So I sit down, pull it up. I I've got it on the screen. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna like show the top 6 like really quick. So I don't, because I thought I was gonna have to sit and wait through a bunch of crap that I didn't care anything about.
Oh, don't worry. There was still a bunch of that.
Yeah, I didn't watch any of it. So I'm
Yeah, I
sitting
had
there,
to.
and they start going through the whole thing about Florida State, Texas, Washington, the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. So Florida State's going to be like, they probably should be 3, right? Maybe they're 4, and if they're 4, I still feel like they match up pretty well, against So I'm just letting the show go, and they announced 1, and I'm like, okay, well, not a shock. 2, not a shock. Then I started getting a little sweaty. Started getting a little worried, and I was like, wait a minute. And then I got on Twitter, and I saw that something had leaked from Vegas about the 4 teams that were going to get into the playoff, and thought, no way. That's the internet being the internet. I'm not going to worry about it, whatever. And then all of a sudden, Longhorns, number 3. And I go back to that photo, and it had Longhorns, number 3. And I'm like, ugh, that's not good, because if they got in, Bama's got to get in, right? Well, that means Florida State doesn't get in at 13-0. And I thought, I've known this sport my entire life. There's no way an undefeated team does not get the chance to play for a title. And I remember they did some hullabaloo hype about what 4 was going to be. And then I remember staring at the screen. Alabama slides in. And I just remember it was like unlike anything that I had felt before in regards to sport. I felt betrayed. I felt shocked. I couldn't believe it. I thought that I was in some sort of a dream. A 13-0 Florida State team with 3 ranked wins had missed the college football playoff by 2 teams that had lost a game. I was just shocked. I can't wait to hear y'all's thoughts on it. Aaron, I'm going to start with you. Undefeated Florida State will not compete in the college football playoff. What are your thoughts?
Got a lot of them, and I'm gonna have to try to condense them down. So you have y'all. I know y'all have your stories about how you came by the news, and for me, I'm preaching on Sunday mornings, and given our time zone, we're a little, we're an hour behind, and so I knew when I saw the announcement of the time of when it was going to be, I was like, well, that's basically the minute that I get up to preach normally each Sunday based on how our order of service goes. And I'm like, so I'm going to have to set my phone aside, because I know the moment that happens, I'm going to start getting bings and buzzes and stuff. And I'm like, that cannot be distracting me. I can't have that going on at that time. So I was like, I'm going to put my phone away and make sure I'm not in a place to hear the buzzes or the bings or any of that kind of stuff. And then went up, preached, ended the service, went out to do meet and greet and stuff at the end, checked my phone, saw the messages that had been left from that, and I was like, okay. And didn't really have time to really think about it or process it at the moment, but at that point I just knew. It was like, okay, they did it. And as I sat and stewed on it, I had more and more thoughts, and I'm someone who kind of thinks big picture, generally speaking, and so I start thinking about the implications of things beyond just the moment. And so I tend to get philosophical, and that's what I'm going to do for this. Unfortunately for me, the thing that leads me to think to consider is that this is just a microcosm. It's an example of the greater cultural trend, and in my perspective, a decay. That is, we have moved away from objective measurements of things, in favor of what do I like, what do I prefer, what's more appealing to me, what do I personally prefer, things that are subjective. And we've seen that shift happen like in sports and how we evaluate teams. It's not wins and losses. It's not, things like that. Now we pull out stats and all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, the arguments, against FSU supposedly are, their offense didn't look good, right? In other words, it's not appealing. And that's the argument that I've seen many people making, whether it's ESPN or whether it is people who are supporting the narrative and the selection as it came out. Many of those points that were made is, well, we just want to see good games. And we don't think FSU would be competitive enough for it to be a good game. We don't want another TCU Georgia, right? And so when you look at that, you say, okay, so what is it exactly their value? One, it's entirely subjective because you actually don't know how FSU is going to play. FSU hasn't played any of those teams, and a lot of them haven't played teams that played other teams outside of like Bama and FSU playing LSU. So there's not a whole lot for you to definitively determine that team cannot play with these other teams other than just your opinion of watching them and what you think would happen. So you have that subjectivity going on that ignores the wins and losses. But then you also just have the reality that basically what people are saying is the best teams are the ones that I will have more fun watching, or the ones I think I will have more fun watching. And that's not sports. If that were the case, the Big Ten shouldn't have had a team represented for decades because that's not really fun to watch. Or Alabama and LSU and their like 9-6 field goal fest that they had back in the day, and everyone tried to convince us that's just great defense. And you're looking at it saying, no, there's good defense, sure, but this is also incompetent offense going on. And so the style and the aesthetic nature of the game, right, that seems to be what's happening now. And so it shows you that people are more concerned about my entertainment, right? The teams that should play for a national title are the ones that are going to entertain me more. Well, that's not the metric for a national championship. It's not who's more entertaining to you. It's what teams deserve to be there, what teams won their games, and which teams didn't. And FSU won their games, and whether it's aesthetically appealing to the style of football that you like to watch doesn't really matter. Did that team did they win their games? And FSU did. And so that's frustrating to me to see that and to realize that that's what people are measuring their evaluation by is not, did you win your games? Did you do all of these different things that need to, mark off the check box, check the boxes that we have had as the boxes that need to be checked for the history of the sport? So no, we don't think it would be fun. We don't think it'd be entertaining. So you don't count. You're not there. Additionally, it just gets frustrating to me because you also have it feels like the way I liken this, I mentioned it to you, I think, or mentioned it on social media. I'm not really mad per se. Like I'm not in a seething rage or anything. I used to be that way with FSU, and I with the changes in the sport and things happening, I kind of moved on, past the rage type thing. But for me, I likened it to when you were watching, like I haven't had this personally happen with a relative that I was like in contact with every day or saw all the time. But I know a lot of people can sympathize with this. And when you've ever been around someone that has been diagnosed with dementia and that process goes on and you start see them losing their identity and they maybe lash out or they don't really act the way they used to, or they don't really understand what's going on. Like you're not mad, like you may be mad at the situation or frustrated or something, but like you're not mad at the person as more as it's just sad, right? It's just sad to see somebody go through that. And that's more of where I am in an emotional range at this point, is looking at college football and the way that it is going. And it feels like an institution that has forgotten what it is and is now just going off the rails and missing the core of the sport. Because I feel like there had to be a time, and I think we've seen it in the past, where the character of a team, the nature of what a team is, a competitive unit of individuals fighting and clawing and pouring out their blood, sweat, and tears, that was appreciated in the past. And that the aesthetics of the team and whether it looked nice was not the metric, because you appreciated the competitive spirit and the fact that a team facing adversity went out and won their games and did what they had to do against all odds when everyone said, oh, they're going to lose. They're definitely going to lose. There's no way they're going to win that game. And then they win. Well, they'll lose this one. There's no way. And then they go out and win. And you see teams fighting against those odds and disproving people left and right. And that used to be appreciated as, well, that tells us how great that team is, that they fought through adversity at something that probably would have broken a lot of other teams if they faced that same adversity. that was appreciated, that character of that team was appreciated. And now it's like, we don't care about any of that. We just want flash, right? We want long touchdown passes. We want things that look fun, right? We want teams that are going to light up the scoreboard. And that to me is just sad, to see what used to be valued in the sport. And what makes competition great is the character development and the way that teams fight to overcome odds. That's what makes it great. And the committee and ESPN have said, no, what makes it great is our pocketbooks get filled up. What makes it great is the markets that we want to be involved in this are going to be involved in this, and we get to sell more ads. And that's just, it's disappointing to see that happen. I'll leave it at that for now, so I'm not going on and on. And maybe we'll share a little bit more here in a minute as the conversation goes, but I'll stop it there for now.
Yeah, you just have to feel bad for Mike, the players, the staff, everybody involved with that team. I, being someone who played the sport, being someone who's followed the sport my entire life, I constantly confuse myself by thinking this is a team that hasn't lost yet. They're 13-0. Why do they not get a chance to win the biggest game there is? And I can't understand people that have played the sport or people that are fans of the sport. All of those things. I can't understand how they think that this is the correct way to go. And justifying that however they think they need to do, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Anybody could be on any team, and if you go 13-0 and you don't lose a game, you should have the chance to win, the biggest game there is. And I just keep going back to that and just being confused as to how this even occurred. And I know people are going to say things about, well, the quarterback got hurt. Oh, well, they're not going to beat any of the playoff teams. Or they came out with this thing today, and they said that Florida State would not be favored in any of the playoff games. And my point is not even that they would for sure win those games. It's not that they would for sure lose those games. It's that if you do not lose, you deserve the opportunity to be on the field against the best. Mm-hmm. And Florida State was robbed of that entirely. And I just don't understand how anybody who is a fan of sport in any way can support what occurred that morning. But
can I speak to a point you just made real quick?
Sure.
There won't be favored against any of the playoff teams. There's going to be one team that's not favored against all of the other playoff teams because it's 1 through 4. Like the fourth team, whatever is considered the fourth worst out of those 4 is not going to be favored. Like there's 2 games being played. 2 of the teams are not going to be favored. What does that matter? There's 2 of the teams are not going to win a playoff game. So this whole notion of like, well, FSU can't win it. Well, 2 of the other teams are also not going to win it. So that doesn't make sense. And to your other point of disappointment in people who have played the sport, I don't know. We obviously don't know how the committee voted, and I don't know how exactly they come to the consensus, if they all end up agreeing in the same way or if they cast their votes and it's just a, democracy, like whatever the most votes gets. So I can't say that I know who voted what or any of that sort of thing. But one person that I would be really ashamed and disappointed in if they left FSU out is Jim Grobe. Jim Grobe's on that committee and a former Wake Forest coach. Highly respect him and what he did at Wake Forest. And the reason why I would be disappointed if he left FSU out is that guy built a program out of something that like he did not have the resources to be a dominant program, and he took what he had. He never was out recruiting anybody. He never had the best stat like players on the field. You didn't line up at Wake Forest and be like, oh man, those guys outclass everybody they play. Like obviously they've got 4 and 5 stars left and right. The guy brought in whoever he could get to come in, and he made a team out of them and got them to 11-2 and made an Orange Bowl or whatever, if I remember correctly, and had a phenomenal season. And he didn't do that because he out-recruited everybody. He did it because he coached a team, and they were well coached, and they fit within the system, and they produced something that was greater than the sum of their parts. So if there's anybody who should look at football being a coach and should understand that the best team is not always the one that has the most recruits or who looks the best on paper. It should be someone who coached a team that made the most out of a program that did not have all of those advantages, and he still made them an ACC champion and coached them well. And so again, I don't know how he voted or how all that came about, but if someone like him left FSU out on the basis of, well, they don't have all the best players, or I don't think they can measure up because of these, who's going to be lining up, that would just really disappoint me. And because someone like him should know that's not what wins football games, that there are intangibles that factor into this coaching, the attitude, the motivation of players, all of that stuff factors in. And that's why you can't just predict the outcomes of games and be 100% right, and usually not even be 50% right a lot of times, because there's more to it than just the recruiting rankings and the stats.
100%. Yeah, you make a really good point. I think that because of how shocking this is, I think that people will dig a lot into how the committee part of that goes down, and I'm really curious to see kind of what comes from that, if anything. But Thomas, we're gonna swing it to you, man. 13-0 Florida State will miss the college football playoff. Um, Tell us about your experience finding that out, and tell us about your thoughts.
So as many of our listeners know, I live in Austin, Texas, right? So I'm at work, right? I know the show's coming up. Of course, my team members, half my team are all Longhorn fans, so they're all waiting to see what happens. We've been talking about this for like a few weeks at this point, and it's been kind of the conversation's been mostly, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and then, and who takes the fourth spot, and we had been debating it and debating it. But there was no question that there should be three undefeated teams. The uh, the only three Power Five undefeated teams was going to be 1, 2, and 3. That was the conversation. And then again, the uh, the college football playoff committee, the reveal is coming up. It's like 20 minutes away. I've kind of timed up my lunch break with it, and one of my team members comes rolling in and says, "Whoa, they just came out with the AP, and Texas is at 3." As soon as they said that, of course it's the AP, right? So it's not we're not going by the AP right now. We're going by the CFP. But as soon as he said that, I just like felt this pit in my gut that somehow this was going to turn sideways, and that was the first time that I had felt that way. Um, and so I punch out for my lunch. As soon as I punch out for my lunch, I look down and I'm getting texts from you, Tori, about the Vegas leak, basically. And at that point, I knew it was in a, kind of a nosedive. Um, but I tried to stay positive. I was really in it. Um, I'm in the team leader office with me, um, a good friend of mine who I work with, and then a couple other people that are all thinking the same thing. We've all got our phones out. We're all watching it on Hulu Live. And number one comes out. All right, it's Michigan. Everybody knows it. Two comes out, Washington. And all of a sudden they reveal three, and the whole room freaks out, um, which was particularly difficult. Um, and then, of course, there was that long pause. You get Herbie saying, it's got to be Bama, it's got to be Bama, and then it comes out as Bama, and then it's just pat on the back, sorry, man. And then I start hearing screaming and celebrating down the hallway. Um, and I sat down for a minute. I remember staring at my phone and like my hands were like clammy and I couldn't hear anything. Um, like I could hear them celebrating, but I like was disassociating completely. It was almost like everything went black except for just me sitting there staring at my phone while they were talking about it. I just couldn't believe it. Um, and what ensued was I was like pale. It was like it was like my wife dumped me. It was like this weird, like heartbreak, nausea feeling. And I had to work through it. Luckily, I left a little bit early, but um,
Perks of being the boss.
It was, you said it, I didn't say that. Um, and it was just bad because you go back to your department and the friend that was celebrating had already told everybody in the shop, hey, Thomas is probably going to be feeling some type of way. So I get people come because at this point in the season, everybody in the store knows I'm a Florida State fan. I wore this shirt to work Saturday. Um, and so it's I'm getting a little bit of non-college football fan where they're like, man, you got screwed. But then I'm getting a lot of that sucks, man, but go Horns, which is also particularly difficult. So a lot of different emotions. I think that I know right now the key debate throughout this process seems to be the best teams versus the most deserving. I think when you say the key metric is the best, I think you're really flirting with, you know, opinions and things like that. And I feel like it's not like rooted in substance. Like, you know, I'm not like coming after Alabama or Texas, but if you ask a Texas fan, why didn't you make the college football playoff? They might say, if they're smart, they might say, well, should have beat Oklahoma. Or you ask Bama, hey Bama, why didn't you make the playoffs? They say, well, we had a chance to beat Texas and we didn't do it. And they held that against us at the end of the year. But you ask Florida State team, hey, why didn't you make the college football playoff? Um, and I guess the answer is a bunch of opinions that all kind of became an entity. And that was like when you watch the Georgia and the Alabama championship game, they just, oh man, this game is so incredible. It's back and forth, haymakers. Oh man, this is the kind of game that we want. There's no way that a Florida State team could play with either of these teams, right? I mean, it was
I mean,
like
we
even
definitely can't play
before
with
that,
USF. You know,
yeah, or TCU or Kansas State, or Houston or Auburn. You know what I mean? And just a lot of emotions there. I feel like again, I feel like the best is a scary place to be. I had a friend of mine an Alabama fan, who had the gall to text me like 20 minutes after the reveal, and he was like, "Tough break, man, but this is what they had to do to get the best teams in." And then he said something about it being the funnest game to watch. And I thought, like, everything about this text, like the two chunks of this text, are what was wrong. Because all you were interested in, not the person, but like the vibe of it all. If it was the best games, then it should really be called the College Football Invitational. And it shouldn't take place within the season. It maybe should take place after the season, where it's like a who's who of the end of college football. It just feels like it just kind of like to your point, Aaron, it just feels like the sport is just between NIL and then this college football playoff. And look, I know the NIL is doing a lot of good, right? But I feel like the sport is kind of spiraling out of control. And I just really hope that this new 12-team playoff kind of creates more equity for teams that, I mean, of course, we know it's basically going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, but um, you just kind of hope that a bigger playoff kind of creates more equity for the teams that, you know, I can't believe I'm saying this because of our brand, but if Florida State wins 13 games and doesn't get into the playoff, that's that's shocking. That's shocking. It's the first time ever. Whenever you say that this was the first time ever, and then it has to be shocking, Um, at one point in time, I because of all of the oh yeah, other thing I want to talk about, I felt like that you guys remember that hate that they had for us in 2014 when we kept winning close games. Like the college football world wanted us gone. The people hated us, schools hated us, ESPN hated us. I feel like they put that on ice and they brought it back. They brought it back to life like the last 2 weeks of the year.
It's like Mariah
They were
Carey.
like, oh yeah, Yeah, they're like Jordan Travis is down. Like, thank gosh, you know what I mean? Like, it's time to move on. But we didn't lose. We didn't lose those games. We won both of those games. We covered and we won by double digits. So like, shocking, sad. Again, it's like heartbreak. I'm only just now starting to like heal from it. Yesterday was really bad, and even sometimes when I'm on, at first when I got home, all I wanted to do was scroll TikTok and watch all of the. I can't believe Florida State got screwed out of the playoffs, and now I just skip them because it's not doing me any good. It's just bringing me back. Um,
Yeah, I lived on
so
Twitter that night. Lived on Twitter. Just it was
yeah,
sad.
right. And then I decided that I was going to tune in to War Chant and listen to my boy Tom Lang and Gene, and they were going to be just as sad and just as angry as I was. Um, and it was great to know that I wasn't alone. And something else that I felt is the like perception of your conference and your team and how powerless you are. It's just really sad because it's like, well, if you were in a better conference, there's really nothing we can do about that. There's nothing that like we can do about that. I feel like the only way this team still makes the playoffs is if they're blowing everybody out 55 to nothing, like 2013 style.
Yeah.
And that team might not happen again over at Florida State. And so I almost felt like there's nothing that they could have done to make the playoffs. Like
Right.
a friend of ours that we played football with said that because of the Alabama win against Georgia, the ACC championship never even needed to be played. It wouldn't have mattered. We could have even blown Louisville out and it still wouldn't have mattered. They still would have put Bama ahead of us. Um, Frankly, I was disgusted with how they did the rankings. Obviously everyone's got opinions here, but I kind of felt like the true way would have been, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Texas. And I understand the argument of, well, if you put Texas in, how can you not put Alabama in? Well, guess what? College football is tough. They both lost one game, but who was the loss to? You've got a head to head there you have to respect. Texas wins I don't care if it was in August or September or whenever it was. Texas wins the head to head. Texas gets the nod. Sorry, Alabama. Maybe next year when it's a 12-team playoff. So I refuse to acknowledge the argument of if you let Texas in, you have to let Alabama in. Like, again, it took a miracle for them to beat Auburn. And I know they beat Georgia, right? I know that win, that's a huge win. Best win in college football or whatever. But it just seems like other teams are allowed to struggle, but we're not allowed to struggle.
Right.
When those teams struggle, games don't matter. When we struggle, games matter.
Yeah. So
Um,
so when the narrative started about the best team, we need to pick the best teams. I was so confused by that because never really at any time in our sport here or in the NFL or in really any sport has the opportunity in the postseason been based on what pundits thought the best teams were. And I kept like just being shocked by the fact that that was even a narrative that was being allowed. Because like what's the point? Did the games not matter? Like is it just like a pageant where we just like march out the teams and say that one, that one, that one, and that one done. Sorry, everybody, go home. Like if that's what it was, then that's what we should do. But if the games matter, then how can you tell a team that didn't lose that they're not one of the four best teams? I just don't understand that. It's you earn a right to play in postseason games. That's how the NFL works. That's how all sports work. You earn the right to be in postseason games. Would Florida State have won against any of those teams? You don't really know. We've got 30 days to heal. We've got a bunch of guys coming back. We saw what the defense did to Louisville. Like, there was a chance, and I just it's just a surprise to me that whole narrative even started, because we've been doing this college football playoff thing now for what, 9 years, 10 years, and it's never been this narrative about the best teams. It's never been that. It's always been the ones that performed during the year and earned the right to be in a 4-team playoff. Full stop.
Well,
That's how it's always been.
when you say, yeah, and when you say best teams, again, that's not rooted in substance. Like, there's nothing there. What is my best team might be different than your best team, you know? So it's just, if it's just about the best teams, then why even play the games? They should just pick the CFP at the beginning of the year and just see how accurate they were. Use
Right.
one of those predictor polls to see if how right they are, or wipe it all away, and all we ever see now is what Vegas thinks, because
Yeah.
they seem to have somebody in the room.
Yeah. Aaron, I feel like you got more you want to say.
Lots more, but I don't know. Feel free to edit this out later if you don't want the want to go in this direction. I'll try to be vague and not ruffle too many feathers. Um, if I was going to explain to, let's just say, like SEC fans or Bama fans or whoever what it feels like currently to be an FSU fan, I would draw this parallel. Go back, depending. So we know what we all live in the South, Southeast, ish, and have at different times. So we know what the demographics are here and what a common political viewpoints are of people in this area. And there's obviously a lot of distrust in the election system lately, and that I think is not one-sided. There's a distrust, I think, in general, but I can think of at least certain demographics that probably fit within not trusting the last election and also being diehard fans of a particular school in the SEC, because I know plenty of them that would have those opinions. And I would say if you go back to the last political headline you read or to the last election results that maybe caught you off guard or frustrated you, and you thought, man, something didn't really quite seem right like about this, something seemed off, I'm not sure, something seemed weird, I'm not sure my vote really mattered, I'm not sure my opinion really mattered on this, or the opinion of people, I feel like the system is going to kind of produce whatever it wants to produce, and none of this other stuff matters. That's what it feels like to be an FSU fan right now. To say that I don't have a lot of trust in the system, and it feels like the system that's in place was just going to do whatever it wanted to do, and the games didn't matter, and FSU could have gone out there and done everything. And I also am starting to think that based on how the games played out, Jordan Travis being hurt or not may not have actually mattered at all. Us playing well without Jordan Travis probably didn't matter at all. I think they were going to push FSU out regardless at this point, based on how things are going. And so if I was going to explain to people in that group who might be like, well, I don't understand what you're upset about, and say, well, if you are of that particular persuasion and politics and you have certain distrust in the system and think that maybe things are determined outside of how they should be determined, that's how it feels like as an FSU fan in sports, is that it feels like things are being determined outside of the way they should be. And that kind of frustration or that sinking of your gut feeling that you have when you discover that, or when your eyes are kind of open to that thought and you actually start entertaining it, that's the feeling that you have, because it's a gut punch. And it's going back, just kind of one last thing I guess I'll hit on is, it's been frustrating. I've been on this point for over a decade now, since ESPN picked up the SEC and began making that their cash cow. But it's becoming more and more obvious, and as things are developing, and obviously Fox with the Big Ten. If you go back and think, why is there this whole mantra of like the SEC fandom, right? Like, why do we even say an SEC fan, right? Like, I'm not an ACC fan. You don't have people historically that are like, man, I just really root for the Pac-12. I am loyal to the Big 12. It's like, no, you're loyal to your alma mater, or to the team that you root for and have grown up at, the team that's from where you are, or whatever the connection is. And I started thinking, why are there SEC fans? And what you start to realize is that I think there's been a big con that was made from the ESPN and from the commissioners of the SEC and the athletic directors, that there was a big con that was made all in their own interest of making money. And I'll explain what I mean by that. What benefit or what reason would the athletic directors of teams like or schools like Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, what benefit is there to that university and that program for them to vote in adding Missouri, Texas A&M, uh, Texas, Oklahoma? What does that benefit their program, and how do their fans benefit from that? Because all it's actually doing is adding that many more teams above them, so that what Dan Mullen did at Mississippi State is not going to be replicated again, because now you're having to fight through Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, go down the list. As opposed to fighting through a few of those, now you've got all of them above you. So the net result is that Vanderbilt, who might have pulled out a bowl season every now and then that they could cheer for, is now like, man, I really hope we win 3 games this year. That'd be a great season. What's the benefit to those schools? It's that the ADs and the leadership pocket more money. But what
Take
does that do for the fan experience?
take the
What do the
check,
fans of Vanderbilt have?
take the
Nothing.
losses. Yep.
Take the losses. But how do they keep them invested in that and not just give up on the program and say, I'll find something else to do? Say, well, you can live vicariously through these teams that we're voting to bring in. You can celebrate that you're a part of a conference that has Texas in it. You can celebrate
Mm.
that Alabama won a national title. So that's how you keep them giving money to your school to line your pockets to say, hey, we're all benefiting from this. How? The fan isn't benefiting from that. The fan's not benefiting from any of that. The athletic directors benefit from it. The facilities and the people who get paid out of this stuff benefit from it. But the fans' overall experience is, man, I really hope we win 2 or 3 games this year. And so ESPN, I think, recognizing that, I would argue, recognized that and said, we need a loyal fan base of people who are going to be on board with this and who are going to provide our viewership and our loyal marketing that we can make money off of. And the ADs and everyone who's a part of that are all thinking from that perspective. And in order to do that, you need to convince fans that they don't need to cheer for their team because their team has no hope. Their team has no future whatsoever. And it gets bleaker and bleaker the more good teams they add in. And if they add FSU in down the road or Clemson or whatever, just pile it onto the pot. And to keep them engaged, say, well, it's okay. You can celebrate because you're in a conference with all these other guys that are good. That's
Yeah,
garbage.
that's a great
That's
point.
not fun.
Yep.
That's not fun at all. And so many fan bases bought it hook, line, and sinker and are just feeding into it. That's my perspective on it, looking at it, seeing how everything is unfolding, the direction it's going, and the same thing's gonna be in the Big Ten, right? If as they expand, what's you know what are Purdue and Illinois going to get out of adding Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA? Like, what does that do for them?
Poor Rutgers.
Rutgers, what does it do for them?
That's a great point, man.
As a fan, it does nothing for you. It just makes it limits the amount of success you're going to be able to witness and celebrate for your program.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really
Yeah,
good
it's
point.
shocking to think about. It's shocking to think about something like, um, obviously things can change in college football, but there's a chance that Florida could never be a great team again because there's like I'm not saying Florida's in that bottom echelon, but it's in that middle echelon, and there's a chance that when you add in Texas, Oklahoma, whoever else to the SEC, that like we might never see a great Florida team ever again because they just get the crap beat out of them, you know. Um,
How sad that would be.
that's their problem,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, it's scary what's happening.
Yeah. I think it's a I don't like to make like sweeping claims like it's a bad day for the sport and things like that, but it is hard to explain away. I mean, I am fortunate that I live where I live. I live around a ton of ACC fans here in North Carolina, and they've been very supportive, and it's been really great, to be honest with you. I mean, at work, they all know that I root for Florida State. It's on my car when I pull up to the store. I talk about Florida State a lot. They all know that I do this. Um, a lot of them who work at the store have been supporting us the entire year. I thank them for that. And I appreciate their support and their comments at work about like, hey man, I'm really sorry you guys got robbed. It's been really nice to see that. And it's difficult to explain to people that aren't really sports fans the nuance here because they're like 13-0. Like, what do you mean you didn't get picked for the playoffs? And for me to have to explain that over and over and over again, it just becomes more and more like hard to believe, really. And so the one thing that I want to make sure that we do with all of this though is reflect on the kind of year that Florida State did have. They did not get picked to go to the playoff. They will be playing the Georgia Bulldogs, which is the best team, in the Orange Bowl, which will probably end up being a game of two teams that have opt-outs all over the place and probably won't be a fun game to watch. But if Florida State wins, all y'all better uninstall all of your social media apps because the Florida State fan base will be hitting like a tidal wave. I'm telling you right now. Telling you. Better not be close. They better win by 1,000,000 because if it's close, that may be enough.
Hey, even if it's close, it proves that they deserve a seat at the table.
100%. 100%. Thomas, did you have anything else you wanted to say about Florida State not getting into the playoffs before we wrap up tonight's show?
Yeah. So if Texas loses, I'm going to be a total scumbag. It's going to be really bad.
So
I'm
okay,
probably going to lose all credibility.
Okay, so I did want to kind of talk about the four teams that did get into the playoffs, trying our best to like not think about the whole Florida State thing, right? So Michigan, they didn't lose, so you got to put them in. Washington didn't lose, beat Oregon twice, got to put them in. Texas, I value the Bama win a lot, so I can understand why they would put them in. And it's tough with the Alabama one. I mean, they just beat the Dogs, so you have to try to find a way to reward them somehow, I guess. I do think that that's the team, though. If you had a built-in excuse, you could just say, well, don't lose to Texas at home by 10. Like, that's your built-in excuse. And I'm just still kind of surprised that wasn't utilized there. But then again, I guess I'm not surprised because of the ACC ties there. But Thomas, just kind of run down the list of the playoff teams and kind of what are your thoughts on those teams and who ultimately do you think sticks out as a team that has the best shot to win the title?
I think so. I think Michigan's going to struggle. I think whoever calls the game, you're going to hear him say at one point, this Longhorn offense really has Michigan on their heels, or this Alabama defense really has Michigan on their heels. Whoever they play, it's Bama, right? Yeah, it's Bama. Um, I think Bama's going to push them around, and I think you're going to get a rematch, Texas, Alabama, and then I think Bama's going to win that game. Um, you know, taking all the Florida State stuff aside, I think Alabama's peaking at the right time. Obviously,
Milrow
big
is
win
a
against
freak.
Georgia, won the SEC, Milrow. I am in the camp of, and they've used this against Florida State, and I'm going to use this against Texas. Um, the Bama team that Texas played at the beginning of the year, or yeah, is not the same. When they played Bama, Bama was trying to figure out who their starting quarterback was. You know, And so they had this quarterback controversy going on. That is no longer the case. Miller has taken over the team. He's taken over the offense. Um, so I think, and this Texas defense is bad. This is not a good. This is not a good defense. Um, so that's where I think Bama gets the rematch with Texas and gets to avenge their one loss. I would prefer if it was Michigan or Washington. And there's a chance that Washington, if we get the same suspect Texas defense that we've gotten almost the whole year, I think there's a chance that Washington wins like 52-41 or something.
Okay, yeah.
Where they just cannot stop Michael Penix. But yeah, so I'm hoping that Michigan and Washington both win. But I don't think that's gonna happen.
So, Aaron, run through the top 4 playoff teams, kind of how you think those games are going to go. We will for sure do a college ball playoff prediction show where we kind of predict how we think that those 2 games are going to go. But just kind of quickly run through those 4 teams, and again, who stands out to you as a team that can lift the trophy there at the end of the year.
Well, as we know, my opinions and predictions are facts, as same as everyone else's.
Of course.
So what I say I think is going to happen is clearly what will happen.
Yes.
Because that never becomes a problem. Um, you know, Bama's never had anything fall their way. They've never gotten any breaks, and it seems like it's just it's a really good thing for them. I mean, they've never gotten to replay a team that beat them earlier in the year. They've never gotten to play a team that was most deserving, like Cincinnati or Michigan State in their playoff game, when everyone knew they weren't one of the 4 best. Bama's just they have to be perfect all the time, and they never get anything like that. And Saban obviously has no idea what he's doing when he gets a month to prepare with his 75 other coaching staff members. So, yeah, Bama's probably the way this always goes. They're going to get to sneak in on some technicality and they're going to win. And that's not who I want to win. And it's not even me saying that I think they're definitively the best team. It's just this is how this keeps happening is they don't win their division and it's like, oh well, but they're still one of the best teams, so we're going to throw them in, give them a matchup against a team that deserve to be there, but we also recognize probably shouldn't be in there, based on those other metrics that we now decided to ignore for just this one year. And so it's probably going to play out that way. But if I had to choose a team that I would be cheering for, it'd be Washington because I can't really respect Michigan for the garbage mess that's going on there with Harbaugh. I would be okay with Texas winning. I know, Thomas, it's a different dynamic for you, but those are the 2 teams, I guess, that I would prefer to win out of the 4. But my cynical self, looking back at how this always seems to work out for Alabama, is Alabama's probably going to find a way to win it. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, I think it most likely ends up a rematch of Texas versus Alabama. In that sort of a scenario, I mean, I guess I would feel better about the Longhorns winning, but I've kind of grown callous to like Alabama winning. So if they won it, I mean, I it just doesn't affect me anymore. Like, kudos to them. Like, their fan base for the most part is like not all that bad, really. So I really wouldn't have any concerns with them winning. But all right, well, was there
you
any?
usually don't even know their fans until the end of the year, so it's fine.
Yeah, right. Okay. But yeah, was there anything else was there anything else anybody wanted to get to before we got out of here tonight? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys both joining me tonight for this somber Garnet and Goal Line. You guys are the bomb. I've really enjoyed doing these. We'll have some pretty cool stuff planned up. We don't have a game for a while, so we got plenty of time to kind of come up with some cool ideas, some stuff to sit down and chop some chat about. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. This has been the newest Garnet and Goal Line. Y'all have a wonderful night, and go Noles.